We begin on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis 11b, about halfway down at the two dots. Gufa. So let's analyze the statement itself. Amar Rav Chisda, the name Rav Chisda said, Suras HaPesach Shasam and Atzad Le'yosav Alaklum. Rabbi Rav Chisda said that if you make a cross beam for a door frame, so if you make a door frame, we said it must be that the beam on top acts as a lintel directly above the two vertical posts that hold it up. But if you have it off to the side, since that's not a typical way of making a door frame, it doesn't count. Rav Chisda further said, the door frame must be strong enough that you can put a door onto it and actually put a door on it in order to count. But it doesn't have to be a very heavy door. It can even be a door made of straw. And the door frame also needs the recognition of a hinge. My hecker's here. What does this mean? Avkasa is the hole. Their hinges were not like ours, two metal plates, one on the door, one on the door frame, and a peg holding those two together to hinge, to turn. But rather, there was a hole in the ground and a hole in the lintel at the top, and the door itself would have a peg sticking up and sticking down, and those would get jammed into the two holes, and that's what and the door would revolve on that. So it would have to have that hole in the ground to show that it is not only a door frame, but also has the possibility and the structure for a door. Ravacha Bereda Rav Avia Talmidei the Rabbi found the students of Rav Ashi. Amalahu Amar Mar Midi B'Tzuras HaPesach. Did your teacher teach anything in regards to this halacha of a door frame being a barrier for an eruv? Amar Lo Yom Avlei Klum. No, he didn't teach us anything about it. Tana Tzuras HaPesach Sha'amru Kana Mekan V'Kana Mekan V'Kana Al Gabeim. We learn that a Tzuras HaPesach, a door frame, by definition, it means two vertical posts and a horizontal post acting as a lintel above it. Tzrichan liga, ain't tzrichan liga. This vertical post that runs above it, does it have to be essentially leaning on the two posts that hold it up, that are going, that are vertical and holding up to it, or ain't tzrichan liga, or can it be higher? It just has to have that image of like a ches. It has two vertical posts and one above, but it doesn't have to actually touch. It could be higher up and held up there by something else. So Rav Nachman says it does not need to touch. Rav Shesha says it does need to touch. Rav Nachman, who is the son-in-law of the Reish Galusa, did that rule that way in regards to an eruv made by the Reish Galusa. Amar Rav Sheshes l'Shabei, Rav Sheshes, who noticed this, he told his servant Rav Gada, whose name was Rav Gada. So he told him, Zil Shalef Shadinu, take it off and throw it away. It's not a valid crossbeam, not a valid top of an eruv. Azal Shalef Shadinu, so he did. The baby Reish Galusa Chavshu, but the housekeepers, the groundskeepers of the Reish Galusa, who is the leader of the community, arrested him. Ozar Rav Sheshet come above us. So Rav Sheshet wanted them to know that he had sent him, so he came and he knocked on the door. Amar Gada Puk to Rav Gada, come out and let's go. So enough. So they let him out and he left and he came out and followed Rav Sheshes. Ashkei Rav Sheshes, Rabbi Rav Shmuel, Amalei Tanim Aramidi B'Tzuras HaPesach. So Rav Sheshes met Rabbi Bar Shmuel and said that did your teacher Shmuel teach anything in regards to the structure of a door frame? Amalei in Tanina we learned Kippah, what a arch. So the door frame that is made that would act as a wall. So the kippah, if it's an arched doorway, the Chachamim exempt of a mezuzah, and Rabbi Meir says it's obligated in mezuzah. And the Gemara is going to tell us, well, how tall is this arch? That would be exempted. Everybody agrees that if you have two vertical posts, meaning the arch only starts arching above 10 tefachim, let's say 30 inches from the ground, then it's obligated in mezuzah because a minimum doorpost, a minimum doorway is 10 tefachim. And if it's 10 tefachim high, it's obligated in mezuzah. Now, even though that this arches, and therefore the actual top of the mezuzah is detached and far away from the 10 tefachim. So essentially, what this Mishnah is saying is that everybody agrees, both Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda will agree that the 10 tefachim sides of the door that are straight count as your doorway, and above at the arch, at the midpoint of the arch, that's going to be the space for your top of the doorway. And we're going to learn more about the halachas of which arches they did disagree about. But from here, we're going to see that everybody agrees you're obligated in a mezuzah, which tells us that the door frame does not have to have the top touching the sides, because in that case, by the arch, the top is farther away from the part that counts as a halachic doorway. Everybody agrees if the arch itself is 10 tefachim high, but there are no straight walls, even 3 tefachim at the bottom. Or everybody agrees if there are 3 tefachim at the bottom that are straight, let's say about 10 inches. But it's not a full 10 tefachim high, that doesn't count as a doorway. So there you don't have to put a mezuzah on. Keep lead. So where is the machlokes? 3 tefachim of the bottom part are straight. So you have the beginnings of a doorway. And the top of the arch is at least 10 tefachim high. And the top part, so the bottom part that's 3 tefachim high, straight, is at least 4 tefachim wide. So that counts as a valid, the minimum size of a doorway, of 4 tefachim wide. But the top, where it begins to arch, you actually don't have 4 tefachim there. But there's enough area that you could cut out if you wanted to. You can cut it out and make it square like a doorway. So Rabbi Meir Rabbi Meir says, since there's ability to cut it out, we imagine as if it's cut out, and you rule it as a halachic wall, a halachic doorway based on the bottom and the top, that you could theoretically cut out. Rabbanan say you don't need you don't count it as if it's imaginarily cut out. You don't say that it's cut out. Right now, you don't have a full 10 tefachim high, 4 tefachim wide doorway, so you don't have to bring, and you don't have to put on a mezuzah. Now, but based on this, Rav Sheshas understood that Rabbi Bar Shmuel was trying to tell him that you learn from that Mishnah that a door frame does not require that the top, the cross beam, which is the lintel, actually touch the 2 doorposts. And similarly for an Eruv, you wouldn't need it. If you find people from the Reish Galusa's house, don't tell them this teaching. Anything of it, let me be the one to teach it to them. Let me retract my halacha. And so the halacha is that the image of a door frame, while the vertical post has to go directly above the post, below it doesn't have to be. touching. And we have that in many Eruvs where they use, let's say, a telephone wire or electrical pole, and they, for the 10 tefachim at the bottom of the pole, you put on a lechi, a vertical post, directly beneath the wire running above, maybe even 10, 15 feet above that. And that counts as a valid Tzuras HaPesach. Masnitis. So the Mishnah says, making a mavoi permissible to carry within it, Beishamai says you require both a vertical post and a horizontal crossbeam above. And Beis Hillel say, no, it doesn't require both. It's either a lechi or a kara. Rabbi Eliezer says, actually, you need two lechis, one on each side, two vertical posts, one on each side. Mishum Rabbi Shmuel said, Talmid Echad, one said, Lefnei Rabbi Kiva, in front of Rabbi Kiva. Beisham and never disagreed about a mavui, who's an alleyway, whose opening at the front is no more than 4 amos wide. They didn't disagree about that it doesn't need more than either a vertical post or a horizontal post. If it is more than 4 amos wide, there up to 10 amos wide. Beisham said it needs both a vertical and horizontal post. Beis Hillel say either one. But Rabbi Kiva says no. The machlokas was both on a less than 4 amos wide opening and more than 4 amos wide opening. In any case, Rabbi Kiva says the opinion of Beis Hillel is that regardless of the size of the opening up to 10 amos, it needs either a vertical post or a horizontal post. And the Shammai disagree about that as well, not like Rabbi Shmuel's student who said in front of Rabbi Kiva that there's no machlokas about that. Now the Gemara at first thought that since the Mishnah just simply says mavoi, an alleyway, that it would be both a mavoi sasim, an alleyway that has 3 side enclosures, so it's a cul-de-sac, and mavoi mafulish, a alleyway that cuts through and that's open on both sides. So, well, earlier in the Masechta on Daf Vav, we saw that there was a machlokas between Hanania and the Chachamim, if whether or not that needs a door frame or doors. So come on, the look of Hanania, the look of Tanakama. So then this, our Mishnah, which says it either needs both a vertical post and a horizontal post, or just either one of them, is not like either opinion earlier. No, our Mishnah is only talking about an enclosed, 3-side enclosed mavui, alleyway. It's a ketzad. And what is Allah? You need both a vertical and horizontal post. Or Beis Hillel say either one. So Beishami say you need an actual, you need a vertical and horizontal post, lememra, which seems to indicate because Savri Beishami Abba Mechitzas Daraisa, that in order for it to count as a private domain for Shabbos, it must have 4 walls. And since it only has 3 walls, you need both a vertical and horizontal post to consider it a wall. So the Gemara says, look, Lizroik, Mishal Shuda Mechayev, to carry something into the alleyway, for sure, from a public domain into a private domain, it counts as a private domain already with 3 walls, as we've seen many times already. A halachic private, a Torah level private domain is 3 walls, and these 3 walls is enough. This alleyway is enough to count as a private domain. And if somebody carries from the public, from a Rishus HaRabin, into the alleyway, for sure they transgress Shabbos on a Torah level, and they'd have to bring a sin offering. However, to carry within that private space, since it looks like and acts like a public domain, because it services multiple chutzers, multiple courtyards, and it's an alleyway, it looks like a street, so therefore perhaps it would, people will confuse it. So even though it has 3 walls and it is really a private domain, in order to carry within there, you need to have a demarcation at the front. fourth wall. But Beis Hillel say either. Beis Shammai would say that you need both a vertical and horizontal post, and for that Beis Hillel say either. And Lema Kasavar Beis Hillel Shalosh Mechitzas Daraisa. So do they say that in order to count as a private domain, 3 walls is what creates a Rishus Harabim, the Araisa, a Torah level Rishus Harabim, a public domain? So Gemara says, perhaps that you could, even if there's only 2 walls across each other, so the 2 horizontal walls along the 2 parallel walls along the long side of the Mavoi is enough to say that this counts as a private domain on a Torah level, and if you carry from the public domain, Rishus Harabim, into there, you'd be chayav and have to bring a Chantas offering. However, letalta, but to carry within there, you need at least 3 walls and the demarcation at the front at the ikashalish.
If you had a Tues Pesach, would that take care of the problem too, or is that not that wouldn't solve the 4th mechitza?
No, for sure. A door frame for sure counts that. A Tues Pesach for sure counts as that. Beis Shammai is saying less than that. You don't need 2 vertical posts and a horizontal post. 1 and 1 is enough.
One. And Beis Hillel is just saying one or the other.
Right.
And that would be enough. But I mean, is it what I'm getting at is the ideal that Tues Pesach and then a Lechi or a Korah is just kind of like a symbolic Tues Pesach, or are they 2 separate different things?
No, they're 2 separate things. In Tues Pesach, a door frame acts as a wall, right? When you have a door frame in your house, that doesn't end the wall. That's the end of that room. It's simply that the wall there opens and closes, but it's still a wall. So that's typical. Every wall has an entryway through it. So the Tues Pesach tells you that this is just a wall that happens to be a big doorway, but it's a wall. A vertical post, a horizontal post, is not a regular wall. It may be a demarcation just as a reminder, as a hecker, or even if we say it acts as a mechitza, it's a very minimal mechitza, much less than a doorway.
What I'm asking is it? Could you say that it's a symbolic Tues Pesach?
No, that's they're acting as 2 different.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not. This is not a partial Tues Pesach, a partial door frame, and that's sufficient. There are 2 separate things. A door frame is an actual wall. Lechi Korah are either in place of a wall, or a separate piece that's in place of a wall, or it's just a reminder you can only carry till here. Rabbi Eliezer However, Rabbi Eliezer says you require 2 vertical posts, 1 on either side of the opening of the Mavoi. Did he mean 2 vertical posts and also horizontal at the top? Or no, only the 2 vertical posts? Tashama. So we'll try and prove it from this story. Rabbi Eliezer went to Rabbi Yosef ben Predi, his student, to visit him, La'ovlin, in a place called Ovlin. And now we're on Yud Beis Amud Aleph at 12:8. And found him that he was sitting in a mavoi, and this mavoi, this alleyway, only had a lechi, a single vertical post at the front. He said to my son, make another lechi, make another vertical post on the other side. Why? I really have to close up the whole entryway? Yeah, let it close up, big deal. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had no machlokes al mavishu pachas me'arba amos she'ein etzarach klum. That if the opening of the alleyway was less than 4 amos, you don't need anything, and we're going to see what that means. The machlokes was only in regards to wider than 4 amos opening of an alleyway, up to 10 amos, because we saw the widest it can be is 10 amos. Beis Shammai say you need both a vertical and a horizontal post. Beis Hillel say either one. Katanimias. So at the end of that brisa, now we can analyze and say, look, Rabbi Eliezer told his student, put up another lechi, to which he responded, I really have to close up the whole thing? Now, he didn't close up the whole thing. He's putting up another vertical post at the other end of the opening. But if you say that he needed also a vertical post and also a horizontal crossbeam above, therefore he's saying, what, I really have to enclose the whole thing, sort of like a door frame? But if you say that he only needed the two vertical posts without a crossbeam on top, so why would he say, well, I need to close it? It's not enclosing. This is what it means. That's what he was asking. Do I need a vertical post on either side? Do I have to seal it with the vertical post on either side? So now, no real proof as to what he meant in his question, and therefore no proof whether Rabbi Eliezer requires not only a second vertical post on the other side, a lechi, but also a kara, also a crossbeam on top. Amamar. But the Brisa had said, and now let's analyze the Brisa. An opening of an alleyway that's less than 4 amos wide does not need anything. Now the alleyway, of course, is wider than that, but the opening is smaller. But we learned that in our Mishnah that a student of Rabbi Shmuel said in front of Rabbi Akiva that such a small alleyway opening of less than 4 amas requires something. Everybody agrees, either a vertical post or a horizontal post. So why is he saying over here that it doesn't require anything? Amar Ravashi Hachikama. So Ravashi said, this is what he means to say, it doesn't need both a vertical and horizontal post like Bishamai. And it doesn't need a double lechi, a double vertical post, one on either side, like Rabbi Eliezer. Rather, it needs one or the other. It needs either a vertical post or a horizontal post like Beis Hillel and nothing more. So when the Brisa said v'lo klum, it doesn't need anything. It means it doesn't need anything in addition to the simple vertical post or horizontal post. Vakama, and how large is this opening if it's less than 4 amos that it needs anything? The minimum is an opening of 4 tefachim. 4 tefachim is like 12 inches. So a very narrow opening to this alleyway. But if the opening is less than that, it doesn't need any. It doesn't need anything. Not a vertical post or horizontal crossbeam on top. Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim agreed, Rabbi Eliezer, who says that you need a vertical post on either side, to say that that's true by the post needed at an opening of a courtyard. And by a courtyard, we call it pasei chatzer, what we call a lechi, at the opening of the alleyway, which is a vertical post. By a courtyard, we call it pasei chatzer. Now, the reason it's called that is because usually in a courtyard you actually have a brick wall. That's the way their courtyards were made, and the wall that was open had a partial wall leading up to the doorway space. So it was actually a little bit of a wall. So that's called a pas, and so they would call it pasei chatzer. But it's the same idea that it would have to have some post, some vertical post on the opening, but here it would need on both sides of the opening because it's a courtyard and it's stricter. That's what Rabbi Yirmi Barabba said in the name of Rab. However, he said that the halach is like Rabbi Eliezer in regards to pasei chatzer, in regards to the vertical posts on the side of the opening of a courtyard. So we have one says that everybody agrees that the courtyard requires a post on both sides. And Rav Nachman indicates, no, they disagree, but the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, man moedin. Well, who is agreeing here? So Rebbe. This is Rebbe agreeing that that it requires a post on either side. Halacha mechlal pligi. But Rabbi Nachman says that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, seemingly that someone disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer who disagrees. That's the Rabbanon. Tanya, so we learn. The Tanya we learn, Chatzani teres b'pas echad. A courtyard, just like an opening of an alleyway according to Beis Hillel, the courtyard only needs one vertical post, one partial wall at one side of the opening. Rebbe Omer b'shnei pasim, and Rebbe says no, it needs one on either side of the opening. Amar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chatzit tzricha shnei pasim. Again, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ravasi said that a courtyard requires one on either side. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Ravasi, mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, is it true that Rabbi Yochanan said it needs an opening on both sides of the, it needs a post on both sides of the opening? But you're the one that said that Rabbi Yochanan requires the alleyway wall, the courtyard wall that leads up to the opening to be 4 tefachim minimal. So if it needs at least 4 tefachim, how can you tell me you need it on both sides? You need 4 tefachim is the minimum on one side. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you need 4 on either side of the opening. We remember, if you remember, we saw in the 2 courtyards that one leads to the other, and you had one courtyard being 10 wide and the other courtyard being 11 wide. So the courtyard that's smaller doesn't have any wall at its opening visible from its side. But the larger courtyard has a visible wall on 4 sides, the 3 sides that it has a wall, and even on the side that's open to the smaller courtyard, it has a little bit of wall, which is 3 tefachim on either side. And if you're telling me Rabbi Yochanan requires 4 tefachim on either side, well, actually, you don't have enough wall near that opening, and so it shouldn't count as a valid wall. And yet the Mishnah says that you can carry in the larger courtyard because it's enclosed fully, because it has 3 walls plus the 4th wall of 3 tefachim on either side, because 1 amma, the 11th amma, is 6 tefachim. Split that in half on either side of the opening. That's 3 tefachim on either side. And yet it works. So how can you tell me that Rabbi Yochanan requires 4 on either side? Must be Rabbi Yochanan when he requires 4 is only on one side, and yet you're telling me Rabbi Yochanan requires a vertical post on both sides. So Kisalik Rabbi Zera, when Rabbi Zera went, again, Rabbi Zera traveled to Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. So when he came, Mimei Parsha, we came up from a water journey, a river journey to Bavel. So he said, Pirsha, so he explained that Beruach achas ba'arba'a, if you only have a vertical post on one side, then the minimum is 4 tefachim. Mishnei ruchos, however, if you have a vertical post on both sides, so your courtyard has an opening of maximum 10 amos, and on either side of it, you have a vertical post or wall, so then that only any amount is going to be enough. Mashu l'kan, mashu l'kan. As long as there's something on either side, on both sides, that's going to be enough. And this is what he said, that this is the opinion of Rebbe, who agrees that you need a vertical post on both sides. And he follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that says that you need a minimum of 3 tefachim on a vertical post. So Rebbe says you need 1 on either side, and 1 on each side, and they need to be 3 tefachim wide. However, Shmuel's the name of Shmuel is said a single vertical post, a single pass wall leading to the opening of courtyard door is going to be sufficient. It doesn't need a pass on both sides. Is that really true that Shmuel said you only need one on one side of the doorway of the opening? But Shmuel told Hanani ben Shela, he told him, you shouldn't allow a chutzner to be counted as enclosed unless most of the wall is enclosed, or if the doorway or the opening is in most of the wall, you need a vertical post on both sides. I don't know, because there was a story in this village of shepherds. There was a courtyard that was up against the water, and it had 4 walls. And then the wall that was was up at the beach, at the waterfront, collapsed, and the water would come in up into part of the courtyard. And they came before Rabbi Yehuda. And he said, as long as you have one side of that opening that leads to the water, and the water is not your courtyard. The water is not is a carmelis. It's a rabbinic space that you're not allowed to carry in, and therefore your courtyard is open completely to a space that you're not allowed to carry in, and the courtyard doesn't count as an enclosed space anymore. He said it will count as long as you have on that opening one side that has at least some of the wall there. That's going to count. Amalei Lushan Yamkam says, oh, you're bringing me a story from water. Water is always more lenient. The Chachamim were always lenient with water because you need water. You need to be able to bring it in and use for washing, etc. So because of the need for water, Chachamim made leniencies that, of course, if it's a Torah level prohibition of a Torah level Rishus Harabim, a Torah level public domain, then the Chachamim would say you're not allowed to carry there. It has all the requirements. But where it's a rabbinic, where really it's a private domain or a makom pater, an exempt space. But the Chachamim counted as a carmelis because it's considered in the minds of people as a public domain. There, Chachamim said if you have a minimum amount of demarcation, it's going to be enough to allow you to bring the water in. So over here, since they needed the water, they were lenient with just one pass, one wall, one post at the side of the opening. Like we see, Rav Tavla asked Rav a question in regards to a dilapidated building where some of the wall has disintegrated at the bottom, but you still have a wall at the top. Does that count as a wall for the bottom? Mechitza teluya, a hanging mechitza, a hanging barrier. So you have the wall that the above is still intact and below is disintegrated, deteriorated. So ma'ushatate b'churva. And would that count as enough of an enclosure in a ruin? He says, no, it only is permitted in regards to water. Basically, if somebody lived in Venice or they lived there, their house was right above a waterway, and they had a porch outside of their window, they can bring water in through there if they have mechitza teluya, they have a wall hanging off of that platform, and there's a hole in there that they could draw the water through there. That would count as creating a private space. Now, really, that wouldn't work in other halachic, rabbinic public domains. But nevertheless, for water, there was a leniency that this mechitza teluya, this hanging wall, would count. But in any case, we have a contradiction in Shmuel. Shmuel said in one place that you need one wall, and another place that you need 2 walls or most of the wall enclosed. When the students of Rav Papa and Rav Huna ben Yeshua came, Pirshua, they explained it. If you could, it's either or. Either you have a single wall, a single vertical post on one side of the entryway, and that would require at least 4 tefachim of wall. Or if you're going to do something on both sides, so then it's sufficient to just have any amount of vertical post on the sides of this opening. Amar Papi, kashili or kashili. But if I have a question on Shmuel, this would be the question. The Amar le Shmuel or Chanani ben Sheila lo tavid uvda ela b'reiv dofen ela shtei pasim. Lama li reiv dofen. Why would he say that don't do anything? Either you have a vertical post on both sides of the opening, or you have most of the wall enclosed. Why most? But arba sagi, it's enough to just have 4 tefachim, as we just explained. And if you're telling me that when he said 4, which is the majority of the wall, that would be that, and was talking about an opening that only had 7 tefachim. The arba havali reiv dofen, and then in that unique case, 4 is enough. You'd have, even less than 4 would be sufficient. If you up until an opening of 4 tefachim, meaning a smaller than 4 tefachim opening doesn't count as an opening. Even it doesnn't need a lechei kor. It's nothing. So over here also, if the total is 7, you don't need a 4 tefachim a wall. It's sufficient to just have 3 tefachim and a little bit, because that's going to make the opening less than 4 tefachim, and therefore you don't need anything. So maybe there's a distinction between a courtyard and the opening of an alleyway. A chutzner has a greater requirement that needs most of the wall, whereas if you have it on one side, whereas the opening of an alleyway, it's sufficient on one side with 4. The Rav Achli Gufei. Maybe Rav Achli himself disagreed. Tanoi. So this is a machlokas. Tanoim. The Tana Rabbanan. Lashon Yam. The Rav Achli Gufei Tanoi. This statement of Rav Achli is a machlokas Tanoim of whether or not you need 4 or most of the wall. Tana Rabbanan. Lashon Yam anichlas achatzer. So this previous halacha, you have a inlet of water coming into a courtyard. You're not allowed to take water from there and draw water into the private domain, because you're carrying from a Carmelis, from a rabbinic public domain, to a private domain. But unless it has a wall that is 10 tefachim high. And this is only true if the gap in the wall, the opening, is larger than 10 amos. Aval eser. But if it's 10 or less, you don't need anything. You're not allowed to bring water in. But what it seems is that even without this extra wall, you're allowed to carry in the courtyard. Why are you allowed to carry in the courtyard? The courtyard doesn't have its proper enclosure. The entire side of that courtyard is open to a place that you're not allowed to carry from, and therefore you're not allowed to carry in the courtyard itself. So now we turn to base on base. This the Gedudi. Gemara says no. When this waterway collapsed the wall of the courtyard, beneath the water there's still some wall. It's just that the water is over it, and since you still have the 10 tefachim high remainder of the wall, so therefore you're allowed to carry in the courtyard because it's actually enclosed. It's just that the water is over it, but you're not allowed to draw the water in unless you make another bit of wall on the side. Rav Yehuda now says something cryptic, which the Gemara is going to challenge because it doesn't seem to have any connection. The Gemara says that you're not allowed to have you're not allowed to have a carry in an alleyway unless it has a lechi, a vertical post. But that's only true if the people in the alleyway, the different courtyards in the alleyway, didn't join in a meal. That's called lenishtatvu. They didn't join in a meal. I think I was going to say, joining in a meal, how does that make boundaries? There are 2 separate things. One is the boundaries, the enclosure, and the separate thing is the eruv, the joining of a meal. But how could it be that just because you don't have a joint meal, therefore you can only carry if you have the boundaries, and if you have a joint meal, you don't need the boundaries? Is that really true? In any case, but that's what the statement seems to say. So and then it becomes a private domain, and somebody who carries from the public domain into would have transgressed a Torah prohibition and needs a sin offering. If he had used a vertical post, horizontal beam, cross beam above, then it doesn't really count as a private domain. And if somebody carries from the public domain into there, he does not have to bring a sin offering because it's not a proper private domain. Maskif la Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes challenged. The basis that you're saying over here is on account of whether or not people joined in the meal. But if they did join in the meal, then joining in the meal would have made it a private domain, and therefore the crossbeam on top would make it private, and somebody carried from the Rishus HaRabim in, he would be obligated in a sin offering. Does the loaf of bread that they all join in make it into a private domain, a public domain? Of course not. That's not the definition. What defines something as a private domain is its boundaries, its walls, its enclosure. If you have courtyards that belong to many, or alleyways that don't go through and through, bein irvu, bein lo irvu, regardless of whether people joined in a meal or not, somebody carries into there, it's going to transgress the Torah prohibition of carrying from a public domain to a private domain on account of that the enclosure makes it a private domain regardless of whether they join the meal or not. So rather, the statement must be like this. Rav Yehuda said, a courtyard that is not sufficient to allow for joining a meal. What does that mean? A courtyard, an alleyway that is open through and through. So if he had put on a vertical post, if somebody carries into there, is going to transgress on a Torah level because he has carried into a Torah level private domain from a Torah level public domain. However, if you use a crossbeam to seal off the opening, there, if you carry from the public domain into this open alleyway that's a through traffic, so then then he's going to be exempt because that doesn't make it into a Torah level private domain. Alma kasavar. So from this we can see that Rav Yehuda is of the opinion that a lechi, the vertical post on the side, counts as an actual barrier, whereas kura, the horizontal crossbeam above, mishum heker, that only acts as a heker, as a reminder of the end, and therefore it's not an enclosure. And that is indeed what Rabbah said, that a lechi is a barrier, whereas the kora, the crossbeam above, is only a reminder. Rava says both are only a reminder, and it would not change the classification of this alleyway itself. After Shabbos, Bez Hashem, we will continue the Gemara over here, talking about this question of whether the crossbeam above, the kora, or the lechi, the vertical post on the side, count as a mechitza, a barrier, and enhances the enclosure itself, or is it simply a heker, a reminder, and it would not change the status of the alleyway from a Carmelis, from a rabbinic public domain into a private domain, a Torah private domain.